Hello, my name is Carl Henning. This is part 2 of a 3-part talk sponsored today by the Hazel Park Library of Hazel Park, Michigan. Thank you, Hazel Park. I have background in IT over 20 years, and I felt that it was my passion and my duty to try to inform the community and the public at large on the various pitfalls of mobile devices, privacy, and the data from which that is leaving your device. Why is it leaving? Did you know it was leaving? And where is it going? That will be the part 3 of the talk. But today, January 14th, 2021, I would like to talk and discuss privacy. There's one variation of the same lie that floats above the rest. We take your privacy and security seriously. According to Pew Research, a nonpartisan fact tank that conducts empirical social science research, a majority of Americans believe their online and offline activities are being tracked and monitored by companies and the government with some regularity. It is such a common condition of modern life that roughly 6 in 10 U.S. adults say they do not think it is possible to go through a daily life without having data collected about them, companies or governments. Data-driven products and services are often marketed with the potential to save users time and money, or even lead to better health and well-being. Still, large shares of U.S. adults are not convinced they benefit from this system of widespread data gathering. Some 81% of the public say that the potential risks they face because of data collection by companies outweigh the benefits. 66% say the same about government data collection. Another measurement, 79% of Americans were found to report being concerned about the way their data was being used by companies. 64% were concerned alternatively with how the government uses their data. Pew Research also found most also feel they have little or no control over how these entities use their personal information. Americans' concerns about digital privacy extend to those who collect, store, and use their personal information. Additionally, a majority of those polled said they are not confident that corporations are good stewards of the data that they collect. There's also a collective sentiment that data security is more elusive today than it was in the past. July 16th, 2019, the Electronic Frontier Foundation and Pierce, Bainbridge, Beck, Price, and Hecht LLP filed a class action lawsuit on behalf of AT&T customers in California to stop the telecom giant and 2 data location aggregators from allowing numerous entities like bounty hunters, car dealerships, landlords, and stalkers to access wireless customers' real-time locations without authorization. Investigations found that any cell phone user's precise real-time location could be bought for just $300. The report showed that carriers, including AT&T, were making this data available to hundreds of third parties without first verifying that users had authorized such access. AT&T not only failed to obtain its customers' express consent, making matters worse, it created an active marketplace that trades on customers' real-time location data. Quote, AT&T and data aggregators have systematically violated the location privacy rights of tens of millions of AT&T customers, said EFF staff attorney Aaron McKay. Consumers must stand up to protect their privacy and shut down this illegal market. That's why we filed this lawsuit today, end quote. The lawsuit alleges AT&T violated the Federal Communications Act and engaged in deceptive practices under California's unfair competition law as AT&T deceived customers into believing that the company was protecting their location data. The suit also alleges that AT&T, Location Smart, and Zoomigo have violated California's constitutional, statutory, and common law rights to privacy. But what types of consumer data businesses collect? What are these? What is the data? Personal data, engagement data, behavioral data, and attitudinal data. Personal data. This category includes personally identifiable information such as social security numbers and gender, as well as non-personally identifiable information including IP address, the web browser cookies, what type of web browser you're using, and device IDs. Engagement data. This type of data details how consumers interact with business websites, mobile apps, social media pages, emails, paid ads, and customer service routes. Behavioral data. This category includes transactional details such as purchase histories, product usage, information, qualitative data such as mouse movements information. Attitudinal data includes metrics on consumer satisfaction, purchase criteria, product desirability, to name a few actually. What about my social security number? What about your social security number? Who has the right to request your SSN number? Federal law mandates that state departments of motor vehicles, tax authorities, welfare offices, and other governmental agencies request your SS number as proof that you are who you claim to be. However, the Privacy Act of 1974 requires that government agencies at the local, state, and federal level disclose to each other, to each person, whether submitting your social security number is required. Details on the use of this information and what law or authority requires its use. Please note, this act stipulates that no one can deny you government service or benefit for failing to provide your SSN unless federal law specifically requires it. You can ask them if federal law is requiring them to ask for them to obtain this SSN number. If you refuse to provide your social security number, companies may choose not to do business with you, and there's no law to prevent them from asking for it. These are some examples of businesses that require a social security number for legitimate purposes. Insurance companies, credit card companies, the three main credit reporting agencies, and any company that sells products or services that require notification to the IRS, including investment advisors, banks, real estate purchases, financial transactions over $10,000, such as automobile purchases and other financial transactions. But why do they collect the data? To improve the customer experience, to refine a company's marketing strategy. The more we know, the more we can help you. So they say. The better your experience at the web page is. I'm not sure how good of an experience one person expects on a web page, but they're going to make it even better. To transform the data into cash flow, they'll simply sell your data. And to secure more data. In this sense, the case would be some businesses use consumer data as a means of securing more sensitive information. That is, for example, banking institutions sometimes use voice recognition data to authorize a user to access their financial information or protect them for fraudulent attempts to steal their information. It's kind of a two-factor authentication. But every industry has long neglected security. Most of the breaches today are the result of shoddy security over years or sometimes decades coming back to haunt them. Nowadays, every company has to be a security company, whether you're a bank, a toy maker, or a single app developer. Companies can start off small, tell people how to contact them with security flaws, roll out a bug bounty to encourage bug submissions, and grant good faith researchers safe harbor by promising not to sue. But what do I mean by that? Essentially, companies offer an opportunity. Safe harbor is you're safe with us if you expose vulnerabilities in our applications, vulnerabilities in our websites, or other aspects of our system, and show them, point those out to us. That's called white hat hacking. And the companies, in order to fortify themselves better and to do a good turn for you or for the people they're serving, close the vulnerability gaps. But in order to do that, they need people to tell them. And this is a safe harbor. It's a way for people to tell them, hey, you've got a couple of back doors, just letting you know. Startup founders can also fill their executive suite with what's called a CSO, a Chief Security Officer, or Chief Information Security Officer, anything, someone with consulting experience from the very beginning. They'd be better off than 95% of the world's richest companies that haven't even bothered. But this isn't what happens. Instead, companies would rather just pay the fines for losing your data. Target, for example, 1 year paid $18.5 million with an annual revenue of $72 billion. The Anthem Insurance Company 1 year paid $115 million in fines after a data breach put 79 million insurance holders' data at risk on revenues that year of $79 billion. And remember Equifax? The biggest breach of 2017 led to all talk, but no action. With no incentive to change, companies will continue to parrot their usual hollow remarks. It's a common trope used by companies in the wake of a data breach. We value your privacy and your data is important to us. Either a mea culpa email to their customers or a statement on their website to tell you that they care about your data, even though in the next sentence they all too often admit to misusing it or losing it. The truth is, most companies don't care about the privacy or security of your data. They care about having to explain to their customers that their data was stolen. A company says it values my privacy? If that were the case, data collection companies like Google and Facebook, which sell data about you to advertisers, wouldn't even exist. When they say, we value your privacy or your data is important to us, it shows that companies care about your data. They don't. It shows that they don't know what to do next. Accounts can be hit by credential stuffing, for example, where hackers take lists of usernames and passwords and try to brute force their way into people's accounts. OkCupid, for example, had this happen. Other companies have learned from such attacks and took the time to improve account security, like rolling out two-factor authentication. Instead, OkCupid's response was to deflect, defend, and deny. A common way for companies to get ahead of a negative story looks something like this. We start out by deflecting. All websites constantly experience account takeover attempts, the company said. But there's no story here. Defend, the company told another publication. Look, no further comment. Deny, when asked what the company will do about it. But this takes us into another level of privacy breach. Systems like Amazon Sidewalk. Amazon Sidewalk, a feature launched in the US that connects Echo and Ring doorbells to any nearby Alexa device, is raising privacy concerns. Business Insider reports, as well as Forbes magazine, customers are forced to opt out of the feature that uses Wi-Fi from neighbors to create a, quote, shared network that helps devices work better. Amazon said steps have been taken to keep user data private. But some say the feature should be opt-in. By default, you are automatically included in the Ring Sidewalk network. It is a mesh network, and it essentially uses a slice of somebody's network, Wi-Fi network, as a type of a gateway for all the other devices so that they can talk and connect to each other. But it is wrong. It's wrong not knowing what your device is connected to. Sidewalk uses a small portion of the internet bandwidth for the service. Customers with a Sidewalk gateway are able to contribute a small portion of the internet bandwidth, which is pooled together to create a network. But Professor Alan Woodward, a cybersecurity expert from Surrey University, said it should be opt-in. This is an extreme violation, and it's very surreptitious. Second case study about privacy is going to talk now about the aware home, and we'll talk about the smart home and the Internet of Things. Georgia Tech started a aware home project in the late 90s. By 2000, they were collaborating on a project. Georgia Tech was collaborating on a project called the Aware Home. It was meant to be a living laboratory for the study of ubiquitous computing. They imagined a human home symbiosis in which many inanimate and animate processes would be captured by an elaborate network of context-aware sensors embedded in the house and wearable computers owned by the occupants. The design called for an automated wireless collaboration between the platform that hosted personal information from the occupants' wearables and a second that hosted environmental information from the sensors. But the difference between their smart home, or the aware home, and today's smart model are based on three assumptions. One, we're dealing with new knowledge domains within people's private domain. The rights to that knowledge and the power to use it to improve the occupants' personal lives would be exclusive to the occupants of the domain. The third was that the team assumed that for all its advances, the aware home would take its place as a modern incarnation of the ancient convention that understood home as the private sanctuary of those who dwell within its walls. All of this was expressed in the engineering plan it was based on. Trust, simplicity, sovereignty, and the inviolability of the home as a private domain. The aware home was imagined as a closed loop with only two nodes. Because of the fine-grained and intimate knowledge of the occupants' health and well-being, their whereabouts and activities, the Georgia Tech team concluded, quote, "There's a clear need to give the occupants knowledge and control of the distribution of this information." In 2018, the smart home had a market value of roughly $36 billion and projected to reach $151 billion by 2023. Part of this was called Google Nest. Google Nest is owned by Alphabet. Alphabet is the Google holding company. Nest thermostat apps gather data from other connected products, cars, ovens, fitness trackers, and beds, motion detection to trigger lights, signal audio, and visual recording, and even send notifications to homeowners or others. Like the Aware Home at Georgia Tech, it collects enormous amounts of data, but unlike the Aware Home, the Google Nest shares data from data stores with Google servers. Each thermostat comes with privacy policy, terms of service agreement, and end user licensing. These reveal oppressive privacy and security consequences in which sensitive household and personal information are shared with other smart devices, unnamed personal and third parties. Nest takes little responsibility for how others in its ecosystem puts its data to use. A detailed analysis of Nest policies by two University of London scholars concluded that were one to attempt to enter into the ecosystem of connected devices and apps, each with their own equally burdensome and audacious terms, the owner would have nearly 1,000 so-called contracts. And like all Internet of Thing devices, try and stop the sharing of, or disconnect from the Internet, and the terms of service clearly state the device will no longer work as expected. Aware Home was gone by 2018. What was critical was that in the year 2000, the assumption was an unwavering commitment to the privacy of individual experience. I'd like to elaborate a bit more on this concept. Smart homes, an aspect of the Internet of Things, offer the promise of improved energy efficiency and control over home security. Integrating various devices together can offer users easy programming of many devices around the home, including appliances, cameras, and alarm sensors. Several systems can handle this type of task, such as Samsung SmartThings, Google Brillo Weave, Apple HomeKit, All Seen, All Join, and Amazon Alexa. But there are also security risks. Smart home systems can leave owners vulnerable to serious threats, such as arson, blackmail, theft, and extortion. Current security research is focused on individual devices and how they communicate with each other. Little research is focused on what happens when these devices are integrated into a coordinated system. December 4th, 2020, the new Internet of Things Cybersecurity Law, H.R. 1668, was passed. The IoT Cybersecurity Improvement Act of 2020 focuses primarily on the procurement of IoT technology and products by the federal government. It has a potential to create a more uniform IoT security standard across the private sector. According to Statista, there will be more than 75 billion IoT devices in use by 2025, which would constitute a nearly threefold increase from 2019. IoT devices are more vulnerable to cyber attacks than traditional connected technology because they often lack the processing power needed to support conventional data and infrastructure protection, such as firewalls, antivirus, anti-malware programs. They often contain backdoors, enabling remote access for a variety of purposes, maintenance and support, to name a few, which create additional security concerns. Within the US, there is no single law governing IoT security across all industries. 2010, Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg declared that privacy was no longer a social norm. 10 years on, and the proliferation of global data privacy regulations like the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, or the PDPA, Singapore Personal Data Protection Act, and LGBT, the Brazil General Data Protection Law, highlights that privacy is still an expectation within society. These regulations ensure baselines of conduct, something sorely missing in the US. There is no regulation present that spans the continent, that spans an entire country, that spans our country. Data privacy as a social norm seems at odds with the recent explosion in popularity for Internet of Things, IoT devices. After all, these devices really rely on personal data to provide the best experience for the device owner, so they say. Many manufacturers and retailers of IoT devices don't realize that these devices fall under the purview of data privacy regulations. As data regulators turn their attention to IoT devices, As data regulators turn their attention to IoT devices, manufacturers and retailers must take steps to stay ahead of developing global data privacy regulations. What are the Internet of Things? What are the IoT devices I'm talking about? Today, anything that can connect to the internet is an IoT device. They overlap with smart devices and include smartphones, laptops, and tablets, fitness watches, virtual assistants, connected appliances and smart home devices, cybersecurity scanners, autonomous equipment used in farming and manufacturing. These devices collect large volumes of personal data, necessitating the implementation of appropriate privacy controls. Security by design. Data regulation bodies, including the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office of the UK, ENISA, the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity, the Union's agency dedicated to achieving a high common level of cybersecurity across Europe, recommended that IoT developers and manufacturers utilize secure software development lifecycle principles, otherwise known as security by design. Security by design obligates software engineers and IoT manufacturers to consider cybersecurity and, by extension, data security. From requirements in design to development and maintenance, as well as disposal, says Johan Lepasier of ENISA's executive director. Like GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation of Europe, privacy by design and by default principle Security by design focuses on the process in place to secure personal data at every stage of an IoT device lifecycle. In addition, all manufacturers and IoT service providers within the UK, for example, must comply with the following principles, which are outlined in the Code of Practice for Consumer IoT Security. 1. IoT devices must not be sold with universal default usernames. They must implement vulnerability disclosure policy, keep IoT software updated, securely store credentials and secure security-sensitive data. All communication, including remote management and control, must be encrypted. They must minimize exposed attack surfaces, including unused ports and superfluous code, and ensure software integrity. The internetsociety.org, that is all one word, the internetsociety.org, states, what is privacy in the context of Internet of Things? Privacy is a key factor in trust relationships. When we disclose data to others, we are implicitly or otherwise trusting them not to use it in ways that conflict with our interests. As we will note in the following section, privacy is linked to the context in which we disclose data. In the context of IoT, privacy boils down to two things. Either we trust third parties not to abuse the data generated by our use of connected objects, or we rely on the ability to control the collection and the use of the data. In the IoT domain, privacy therefore carries strong implications of trust, transparency, and control. The ability for individuals to control how the information collected by their IoT devices is shared and determine who has access to the data from the devices in your home, in your car, and on your person. This means easy ways to blind and mute devices, and to have a say in how IoT data is analyzed or shared with third parties. Clarity about how information about people is collected, used, and shared with others. IoT devices and their applications should enable the user to find out what information is collected and shared, when and with whom. The ability to determine how identifiable one is when undertaking online and offline activities. IoT devices should have the option for pseudonymous or anonymous use. The ability to control one's digital footprint, especially from IoT devices in intimate settings. The user should understand what information about them has gone and how long it is kept. Privacy is a social value as well as an individualistic one. It supports and empowers people with the option to withdraw from the gaze of and interactions with others at will, at the right to respect for their personal space, and to create solitude and reserve from others. This right is reflected in both the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the European Convention on Human Rights. Surveillance capitalism. The term surveillance capitalism, fashioned by Harvard professor and author Shoshana Zuboff in her book by the same name, is used to describe the new commodity, a new economic order that claims human experience as free, raw material for hidden commercial practices of extraction, prediction, and sales. The devices and the conveniences are bait. The age of surveillance capitalism runs contrary to the early idea of the Georgia Tech project, the Aware Home, I discussed earlier. The boundaries of our personal worlds have been breached. Companies now lay claim to control and monitor human, societal, and political territories. But much like the Gilded Age of economic and social injustice, immense concentrations of wealth that we called the Gilded Age taught people how they did not want to live. By way of progressive legislation and the New Deal in the 30s that curtailed the robber barons of the late 19th century. Surveillance capitalism instructs us in the irreplaceable value of our greatest moral political achievements by threatening to destroy them. Surely it teaches us that we do not want the future that companies have in store for use. It strips away the illusion that the networked home has some kind of embedded moral content, that being connected is somehow intrinsically pro-social, innately exclusive, or tending towards the democratization of knowledge. Equality in building a more connected world. Digital connection is now a means to others' commercial ends. At its core, surveillance capitalism is parasitic. It preys on man's curiosity, sometimes changed acceptance of what's new and convenient, but never before has the price been so high. You need only give up the very essence of what makes you you, your privacy. But conditioning goes a long way to us, allowing us to fall prey to these temptations, to this bait. Conditioning is the approach in which behaviors are selected for success by environmental conditions. Think of training a dog to sit by giving it treats. The dog's behavior is conditioned to obey using a reward system. This can also be applied to greater human populations. Get an education, get a job, succeed, find a partner, reproduce, and succeed. According to B.F. Skinner, conditioning, the Harvard professor who studied, actually he did a research in the early 1970s on behavioral modification, quote, conditioning at scale is essential to the new science of massively engineered human behavior. The goal of everything we do is to change people's actual behavior at scale. We want to figure out the construction of changing a person's behavior, and then we want to change how lots of people are making their day-to-day decisions. When people use our app, we can capture their behaviors and identify good and bad ones. Then we develop treatments or data pellets that select good behaviors. We can test how actionable our cues are for them and how profitable certain behaviors are for us. This was a recent Silicon Valley quote. Within the last 5 years, on the abilities to modify, and affect human behavior using technology. Facebook was a $61 million person experiment in social influence and political mobilization. Shoshana Zuboff, who I mentioned, the author of Surveillance Capitalism, summarizes the results from the study to conclude that Facebook and other internet companies had the power to persuade, influence, and manufacture human behavior. Online messages influence our experience of emotions, which may affect a variety of offline behaviors. There is now experimental evidence to support the controversial claims that emotions can spread throughout an online network. The Journal of Future Studies.org, JFSDIGITAL.org, JFSdigital.org. The first steps begin with naming, establishing our bearings, and reawakening our astonishment and sharing a sense of righteous dignity. Giving voice to our collective outrage and refusal of the diminished futures, on offer, and becoming alert to the historical contingency of surveillance capitalism by calling attention to ordinary values and expectations that existed before it began its campaign of psychic numbing. Remind people, reflect on the way the real world operates. Create an establishment of new centers of countervailing civic power equipped with laws that reject fundamental legitimacy of surveillance capitalism. We have to do more to fight it in the United States. Let's follow the Europeans' lead. The fundamental legitimacy of surveillance capitalism's declarations and interrupt its most basic operations. To close, the Chinese artist, filmmaker, sculptor, and human rights activist Ai Weiwei, that's AI is his first name, last name is Weiwei, from an early 2019 article states, what does it mean to be human? That question sits at the core of human rights. To be human has specific implications. Human self-awareness and the actions taken to uphold human dignity. These are what give the concept of humanity a special meaning. Human self-awareness and human actions determine the interplay between individual thoughts and language and the wider society. It is our actions as humans that deliver economic security, the right to education, the right to free association and free expression, and which create conditions for protecting expression and encouraging bold thinking. When we abandon efforts to uphold human dignity, we forfeit the essential meaning of being human. And when we waver in our commitment to the idea of human rights, we abandon our moral principles. What follows is duplicity and folly, corruption and tyranny, and the endless stream of humanitarian crises that we see in the world today. To close, Shoshone Zuboff states, instrumental reason is linked to values such as power, money, and greed. Its products become pathological. If, on the other hand, the systems and products of the IT revolution can be realigned with positive values and life-affirming purposes, then the human and global prospect would improve dramatically. Thank you.